Next, we turn to some statements coming out of Tehran, where Iran has accused the United States of sabotaging diplomatic talks before its recent attacks. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Esmaeil Baghaei, said the US waged war while Tehran was engaged in negotiations. Baghaei added that the US and Israel have violated international norms. He also claimed Washington aims to partition Iran and seize its oil resources. The spokesman insisted Iran remains committed to friendly ties with regional countries. He stressed the right to defend itself if other territories are used against Iran. Responding to reports of attacks on Turkey, Cyprus and Azerbaijan, Baghaei denied Iran initiated any offensives. He suggested some reports may be staged to create tension. He described the conflict as a war of necessity, not choice, and said Iran is doing its best to protect diplomatic missions. Baghaei ended by praising the bravery and sacrifices of Iran's armed forces. Let's take a listen in directly to his statements.
کشورهای اروپایی در برهه‌هایی متاسفانه به شکل‌گیری این روند کمک کردند. زمانی که به جای اصرار بر حاکمیت قانون، به جای ایستادگی در برابر قلدرمآبی و زیاده‌خواهی آمریکا با اونها همکلام و همنوا شدند در شورای امنیت سازمان ملل در رابطه با بحث بازگرداندن تحریم‌ها و همه این موارد در کنار همدیگه باعث شد که طرف‌های آمریکایی و رژیم صهیونیستی جری بشن در ارتکاب.
Joining us now to discuss some of the statements coming out of Iran is Sol Sanka. He's a political commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Sol, thank you very much for joining us here on the broadcast. We saw those negotiations in Geneva over 10 days ago now. They concluded, things were sounding positive, and then the day after, the Trump administration and Israel launched an attack on Iran. Iran's spokesperson there accusing the United States of abandoning diplomacy too early and launching an attack. Of course, things have escalated since then, but this remains a common critical point, that the United States did not give diplomacy a chance. What do you say to those critics?
Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? The Iranians have been negotiating over their nuclear program in bad faith for literally 25 years at this point. Constant deals and offers, and then reneging on the deals and going back on the offers. But all the time, their mission, which wasn't even hidden, was to build up a stockpile of nuclear fissile material, which would allow them to immediately break out to a bomb. And thank God, the Trump administration came round to the view at some point recently, perhaps in the light of the fact that Trump himself was the subject of at least 2 assassination attempts by Khomeini, that this wasn't going to fly anymore, and that these negotiations, there's no reason why America should be held in the highest esteem of good faith to constantly be plagued by a regime trying to build a bomb. People are not stupid. There's no reason other than wanting to build a bomb that Iran would put their nuclear material, which they don't need because they have so many hydrocarbons, they could supply their own population with power for 2,000 years. The fact they're building this stuff means that they want to build a bomb, and they weren't shy about this fact, really. And this was all one game. And Trump called their bluff, and he pulled the wool over his eyes on that Friday when the Omanis came forward and said, we finally have a deal, but he'd had enough. And to be honest, it wasn't really surprising for anyone who'd been following it closely, but it was surprising for the Iranians. And that was the key. The only way this war was going to get off to a literally bombastic start, complete success, and the decapitation essentially of the leadership of the regime was if the Americans had the surprise.
Yes.
And that surprise was achieved via the implication that the talks were potentially still ongoing.
So according to reports, so those initial discussions, Trump apparently was offered a better deal than Obama was in 2015, yet he still attacked Iran anyway. Those are some pretty credible reports that came out of those talks. There are some reports as well, of course, that Netanyahu pushed Donald Trump to launch this attack, something which both parties have denied. Another common talking point about this conflict is that this war is not in the United States' interest coming out of the region. This conflict has been under much scrutiny due to the unclear messaging that the Trump administration, of course, has pushed. When citing those nuclear strikes by the United States back in June at the end of the 12-day war, Donald Trump, of course, saying that those nuclear sites were completely obliterated. Then the United States used that talking point once again to launch this conflict. How does one wade themselves through the Donald Trump narrative when it comes to launching this war?
Well, it's important to pick away the politics from the reality. So it could well be that after the strikes in June, which were very successful in destroying the Iranian ability to enrich uranium in the present, but of course you can never, in a present-day strike, prevent them from doing things in the future. So it was always going to need continual overwatch to make sure they don't try and rebuild. That's the first thing. Also, the Americans were clear at the time that while they felt they had done significant, if not terminal damage to the Iranian nuclear program, the Iranians still were in control of around half a ton of highly enriched uranium that could quite easily be turned into 10 or 11 nuclear bombs. Of course, once a state has 10 or 11 nuclear bombs, well, that's it. They have a nuclear umbrella, and no one can dare attack them in the future for fear of getting attacked by them in return in a nuclear way. So once you have 10 bombs, that's it. So if they would have had 10 bombs, they could have continued and built 1,000. And once they have, of course, missiles capable of carrying those bombs, which they have thousands already in theory, then there's nothing to stop them under their nuclear umbrella, which they would have achieved if this hadn't happened. Nothing would have stopped them from building missiles which can not only reach Europe and India, as the current ones they have do, but they could have easily built missiles to reach America. And what are you going to do if they start building those missiles?
So
you're not going to be able to stop them because they already have the nuclear umbrella. So that's why we're very lucky that, you can criticize Donald Trump this way or that way and say maybe he is telling a fibs here and there. It doesn't really matter. In the end, we're very lucky that this has happened, and maybe it was Netanyahu that persuaded him, maybe he wasn't. All of that would be to Netanyahu's credit if it was his. Because if this hadn't been done, this hadn't been done, the inevitable result in the future, if not now, but in a year or 5 years, would have been a nuclear Iran. And these are not normal people. These are people that crave Armageddon. They want chaos in the world, and they want war. And they're not joking when they say death to Israel, death to America. That really is their creed.
So apologies, we are running out of time. Thank you very much. Do stay with us. We're turning